Hello, Kane here again with some more digital painting. I've been working on a landscape image. This is to be the first page of a comic I'm working on. So you just saw there was the original image that I had, which I'm not happy with at all. It's really not working. So I've started doing a few thumbnails just to get a feel for different ideas and just to kind of figure out why the other one isn't working and what I can do to make it work. So the top three images were just quickly sketched out from some photographs I found on Google, just things that were roughly in the kind of uh, style, sort of placement of objects and horizon line and all that of what I was looking at. So then just switching back to the original one again, just to kind of get an idea of what I'm trying to do. So the image is sort of an establishing shot. What I wanted out of it was the characters are in an old cemetery, a very old mausoleum is sort of the location. It's very sort of D&D, it's like a dungeon almost. And so I wanted that in the foreground to get just a sense of where they are, and then there is this sweeping backdrop, this kind of these fields that go off to the distance to where you've got the sea, and there's the sea side city of Rhina, I think I named it. So that's what I'm blocking in there. Because I really want just to get a sense of this world and the location that everything is in. But it's really difficult to get a sense of depth with landscapes anyway, I think, especially the way I tend to paint. I'm not great with backgrounds and landscapes and things at the best of times, but I find that this sort of viewpoint and this kind of location is quite devoid of things that you can layer in front of each other to create the sense of depth. You've got to rely much more heavily on sort of scale of things and the intensity of the colour and the tone and all that. Which, I mean, you can do it, but I'm just not well practiced enough. I think most of what I do is more character based. I kind of want to break out of it a bit and do a little bit more of this sort of thing. So as you can see, I'm just putting in as many objects as I can that might communicate depth and distance. So I've got that. I'm trying to put something in the foreground and getting the road in there so it kind of trails off into the distance. But none of it's really working. And there's a bit, I'll kind of explain exactly what I'm doing wrong a bit later once I start painting up the actual one I think I'm going to go with. So I've kind of put the colour away for a moment and just trying to block in, or not block in, but sort of draw in the composition and try and get a feel for how I'm going to guide the viewer around the image. I didn't quite like the way that was turning out, so I just went on ahead and started drawing in the next one. Just putting the city in the background, very, very small, see if I can get more that sense of depth that I'm really trying to communicate in all these images so far. I was already liking where this was going, so I jumped straight into doing some colour on it. I usually keep everything to black and white, but I really need to practice some colour. And this is quite an easy thing to do just with colours, especially thumbnailing, so you don't really need to get the tones spot on for it to work. So it was around here that I think I started noticing the issues. I'm trying to put in something that blocks that right side of the image, so the eye kind of travels left to right and up to the city in the background. But I cannot get a good sense of how far away that is, especially once I've put in these objects close to the viewer. So I've got these gravestones to obviously show that it's a graveyard, but it's blocking that right side, and there's a curve from that broken one that draws the eye up to the city, and it's just too much. I think because I've got the location the characters are going to be in the foreground, and then I've got all this stuff going on in the background, which is perhaps not really necessary information right now. As the first page of this comic, it's probably not necessary that the reader knows that the city is sort of this distance away from where our characters begin the story. So I'm putting in a lot of effort to try and get these in the same image, when really I can just put an image of this city later on when the characters leave the graveyard, and leave the graveyard out of it because we already know they've been there. So it's really an unnecessary amount of work, I think. I've got a really high angle view in that first image, which makes the reader really distant from everything that's going on. There's a kind of a wall between the viewer and the location, because you're kind of soaring over it. You're not getting a view of the actual land itself as if you were there, which I think is a shame, because I think that's a little bit more what I'm trying to do with the comic, is to try and bring you really into each location, each space that I'm trying to make. So I immediately scrapped everything that I was doing and just went straight into doing a view of the graveyard itself and the sort of cemetery gates, and I've put it on something of a hill, so it's just kind of looming over whoever is viewing this image. Started off with kind of doing it like steps, but I thought actually maybe more like a pathway up a more gentle slope would be more interesting and more fitting with the kind of landscape I am trying to create. So in this view, the city would actually be behind the viewer, so I don't need to worry about any of that. I can just really get into showing the location that our sort of characters that we're going to be following have actually gone to, and give the viewer, I guess, the same viewpoint that they would have had previously. This is, the characters are already at their location, so we're kind of following up behind them. So the first image of the comic is going to be the outside of the mausoleum that they have entered, and then I think the next panel is actually from the front of them, so you've kind of swiveled around to the front of them, but it gives you a little bit more connection to them as you've kind of followed their path for sort of 2 frames, for 2 panels, and then you're with them. So that's kind of the idea that I'm having. So again, I'm trying to get I'm using very much the same placement of objects in this. So the important thing we want to look at is in the sort of top right of the image. We've got a path that leads up to that, and I'm trying to block off that right-hand side of the image with the gravestones again. So you can't help but sort of follow it from left to right up through that path to the gates, which is obviously the direction our sort of heroes, I suppose, would have gone in. I put the light source at the back behind everything, which I don't usually do, but I kind of like the idea of putting a sort of everything in silhouette that's on that hill, and it gives us these I've perhaps done them slightly the wrong angle. They're perhaps facing too much to the right. They should be more down toward the viewer, but the shadows diagonally across. So again, we've got that. It's leading the eye across to where it's blocked off by the gravestones on the right. So you can't help but sort of look up toward that gate. That is the main focus of the image. This is working so much better. And I've pretty much settled on doing it almost exactly as you see here. I don't like the design of the gate, so I'm going to go back and do a few drawings on that before I make the final image. I may shift that light source around a bit so it's perhaps a little bit more to the left, so it's just slightly off the panel. But ultimately I think that has kind of immediately worked, just as I kind of figured out what I was doing wrong with the previous images. It kind of all clicked into place, and I don't feel like I need to do any more versions of this to get my final one. I can just sort of start working into it, I think, which I think is really great, because I've been struggling with this for a while, and I really need to get that comic started. And without that panel, I can't really. Well, I mean, I've done quite a few pages so far, just not that first one. Anyway, I've rambled for long enough. If you enjoyed that, like and subscribe. I will have another one next Friday, presumably. We haven't had so many updates in the past week. Things have gotten away from us a little bit. I've got a few things on the go that need just finishing off recording and editing. So there'll be something up definitely on Wednesday. Hopefully there'll be another one on Monday as well. Anyway, thank you. Bye.